Hello, good evening, and welcome to Prog Chattery 777. We are talking about Primus, and we've made it to their 8th studio album, Primus and the Chocolate Factory, with the Fungi Ensemble. So this was released in 2014, and it is very much a strange album. It's a weirdie but a goodie. Um, as the as the title would imply, the entire album is a reimagining of the soundtrack to the film Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory from 1971, starring Gene Wilder. And as such, there's no original compositions on this record. It's all, every single song is, a cover of, one of the songs from the Willy Wonka movie. That being said, they certainly treat the songs as if they were their own. They put a lot of work into radically rearranging the songs, as one would expect. It is Primus, after all. So a couple other notable things. There's been a lineup change since the previous album, Green Naugahyde. So once again, Tim Herb Alexander has replaced Jay Lane on the drums for the second time. The first time it happened back in late 80s, and it happened again in the early 2010s. And of course, Les Claypool on bass and vocals, and Larry Lalonde on guitar, as per usual. In addition to the classic Primus lineup of Les, Larry, and Tim, we also have the Fungi Ensemble, which is Mike Dillon, who was an additional percussionist, and Sam Bass, I believe his name is, Sam Bass, who was the cello player on this. So it's the only Primus album to have a collaboration with other musicians. And the sound on the record is very, very interesting. Claypool plays a whole lot of double bass on this record. There's a lot of stand-up on this record. And with the contributions from the Fungi Ensemble and all that, it almost feels like chamber music. It's the closest Primus will ever come to being chamber music. In a lot of ways, it doesn't really have that classic, definitive Primus sound. But I mean, again, it's an album of covers, right? It's a reimagining of an old soundtrack. But that's always been an interesting thing to me. The album doesn't quite rock or thump like a lot of other classic Primus records. So that's certainly very interesting. I think another contribution to this, I can't talk today, to that sort of chamber music sound. The other contribution to this chamber music sound is the drum set that Tim Alexander is using. He's using a very, very unconventional drum set with a whole array of found instruments and different sounds, and that's really, really apparent on the record, and it gives it a different texture from Primus that we're otherwise familiar with. And the other thing that always kind of stood out with this album, is that even when it was released, is I feel this is one Primus album where the lines between a Primus album and a Les Claypool solo project are kind of blurry right here. I think the Fungi Ensemble features members of, was it the Fearless Flying Flog Brigade, I think it was? So I mean, they had worked with Claypool on solo projects and whatnot, and now they're being brought into to the Primus project. And the whole Willy Wonka thing too really seems like it seems like Claypool's baby in a lot of ways. I think he was quite excited to do this, and there was a recent interview actually where he was talking about as he grows older, he starts getting the urge to do all these bucket list things, and I guess one of those things was to completely rearrange and creepify the soundtrack to Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. It's kind of a funny thing, really. I mean, I know it's a classic film, but I think I've only seen it like once or twice in my whole life. I enjoyed it. It wasn't a bad movie. It wasn't anything that I obsessed over. So I mean, I've listened to this far more than I've watched the original movie. I'm more familiar with the soundtrack through Primus than I am with the original score. That said, I'm a huge fan of Gene Wilder, as I think Les Claypool is. As it says in the liner notes, this album is dedicated to the wondrous genius of Gene Wilder. But yeah, it is quite something. I certainly didn't have any complaints when it came out. but it's just different, you know. It doesn't quite feel like a classic Primus record. It feels a little more like that Claypool solo project featuring Primus. And I guess that might be why Fungi Ensemble has been put into the title there, the title of the album. And having said all that about it being kind of a Claypool baby, it's funny because this album is the first time we get to hear Larry Lalonde as the lead singer. He does sing lead vocals on one track, which is quite cool. And speaking of the tracks, let us talk about the tracks. I'm going to take a sip of water here. And we will commence. So the album opens with Hello Wonkites. Great intro to the album. It almost reminds me a little bit of One of These Days by Pink Floyd, except he's playing it on the stand-up bass. And eventually goes into a very low, menacing rendition of the melody for Pure Imagination, and that's kind of like the theme of the whole album, as it is the movie. And just really powerful. I mean, except Pure Imagination is certainly a classic song. Again, I've always really loved that song. There's all kinds of really good jazz renditions of it. There's a million covers of that song. Such a powerful melody, and it's great to hear Claypool just ripping it out on that double bass. It is quite something. But yeah, Hello Wonka, it's just a short intro, kind of sets the stage and then ends quickly, and then we move on to track 2, Candyman. Again, absolutely nothing like the original version of Candyman, as one would expect. Again, Claypool is on the double bass, and this is where we first get to hear Tim Alexander's bizarre drum kit, and it serves as the intro to the song. He's hitting all kinds of bizarre percussives there, which is very interesting, and it works its way into this slow crawling, menacing, growly song. Again, that double bass. It's it definitely has that menace, and of course, Claypool's vocals are quite something else too. He's really pushing the I don't want to say redneck. I don't want to say that that's offensive. He's pushing that style to the limits, which is really cool. Makes the world taste pretty dang good. Love that. It's fantastic. And then he has the high vocals too. The Candyman can, because he mixes it with love. Which it is so Claypool. The whole Willy Wonka thing. I mean, they do weird justice. They do very weird justice to the whole spirit of Willy Wonka, and not that I'm super familiar with that. Like I said, I've listened to this album more than I've seen the original film, but yeah, Candyman is really good. It's a really cool song. First proper song on the album, really. Then we move on to track 3, Cheer Up Charlie, which is it brings things down a little bit. Again, this is where you kind of get that chamber music vibe. There's 2 extra guys playing with them, but there's a lot of space in the mix, and I mean, Claypool's not doing the whole virtuoso thing. Very simple, simple ways of going through the chord progression there, and again, his vocals are quite fun. They suit the whole chorus quite well. It's okay, not one of my favorite songs. We get to track 4, Golden Ticket. This is one of my favorites on the album, so it picks right up once again. Again, Claypool's voice is just so fantastic on I Got a Golden Ticket, and Larry Lalonde gets a lot of really great little licks there. He's got the very slow intro as well, and then it turns into another fairly high energy number. Again, not super heavy or stomping like some of the stuff that they had done before, even on Green Naugahyde. But it's cool, and this is very Primus kind of vibe. I think I get a strong Primus vibe out of Golden Ticket. Then we get to track 5, which is Lermaninoff, and I don't really understand this track, but it's there. It is 2 seconds long. It is a very quick, cool little Larry Lalonde guitar lick, followed by the word Lermaninoff. So I'm not sure how that ties into Willy Wonka, but it's there, and hey, it serves the flow of the album, I guess. Then we get to track 6. Now this is pure imagination, opening with the big vocal line, "Welcome to the chocolate room," or "Ladies and gentlemen of the chocolate room." And at first, I didn't quite get this version of Pure Imagination. Like I said, it's a song that I've always appreciated and I've always liked, but for whatever reason, like the version didn't quite do it for me until later on. Maybe the last few times I've listened to it, I've thought, oh yeah, that is quite cool. But when I first heard it, I thought it was very repetitive. Again, that very simple Larry Lalonde line, ding 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 ding. Then the vibes kind of put some creepy harmonies on top of that, but it repeats quite a lot. But I think what I realized is I was trying to pay too much attention. I think I was paying too much attention to it. And if you kind of, have it as background music, it really creeps up on you. It's got a very hypnotic sort of vibe to it. And again, it's got that menace as well. Is it primacy? Not really, but it's strange and it's atmospheric and lots of really great percussion and whatnot, courtesy of Mike Dillon. And yeah, it's probably still not my favorite version of Pure Imagination, but it's up there. It is bizarre and it is fantastic. Then we get to track 7, the first of the 4 Oompa tracks. We get Oompa Augustus. And the funny thing with this is that I think Primus didn't really need to do that much to it because the Oompa songs are inherently very strange and creepy and disconcerting and all the rest of it. But again, Claypool's voice is very, very well suited to it. Oompa, loompa, doopa dee doo. It definitely works quite nice. And again, the 4 Oompa tracks are, they're about a minute and a half each. So I mean, for the rest of the album, they kind of, it marks the second half of the album, if you like. So after Oompa Augustus, we get track 8, which is Semi-Wondrous Boat Ride. Again, we get Claypool on the double bass, and it's I believe it's been a long time since I've seen the movie. I believe at this point they are all going through a boat ride in the River of Chocolate, or something like that, and it's very creepy and very disconcerting, and it's not like again, it's not heavy. It's all about atmosphere. We get that repeating on the double bass, and then it gradually gets faster and more manic, and then there's lots of sort of I mean, it really is quite avant-garde and surreal and abstract. But we get all kinds of random sounds, and Claypool doing his, fast talking and whatnot. And it's a very visual song, and you can follow the story of the Chocolate Factory. Or not really follow the story, but I mean, you see where the soundtrack is taking the film, if you catch my meaning. But yeah, it's quite interesting little bit of madness. We get to track 9, Oompa Violet, the second of the Oompa songs. This one is quite fun because it's the one that refers to bubblegum, and because Violet's the girl that chews too much bubblegum. And I like the line, the way that a cow does. Quite cool. Track 10, this is a notable song. This is I Want It Now. This is one that I always remembered from the movie, and this is probably of all the songs on this album, this is arguably the closest one to the original, other than the Oompa songs. But the big notable thing is, of course, we have Larry Lalonde singing it, and I think that was a good decision. I think, again, he's not normally a singer, but I mean, he can really capture the spirit of that song with his. The tone of his voice just seems to work really, really well with it. And there's some great soloing on it there. Yeah, it's again, it's a song that I never really liked when I first heard it, but I quite like it now. It's not too bad. Moving on, track 11, Oompa Veruca. Another Oompa song. This point, it does. You kind of sense the pattern. It just keeps going back and forth and back and forth, and that's all right. I still quite like it. It's quite entertaining and quite good. Track 12, we get Wonkmobile. This is another big moment of surreal, abstract, avant-garde madness. And Claypool's redneck fast talking is even faster and more crazy and more unintelligible, which is very, very cool. Then finally we get to track 13, the last vocal song of the album. We get Oompa TV, the grand finale of the Oompa songs. And this is probably my favorite one, because, well, it's the only one that's a little bit different. At the very end we get, you'll get no commercials. And for whatever reason, it's just such a simple little musical thing, little arrangement, but I listened to it earlier today before I came to talk about it, and I got goosebumps when that part came in. Again, the melody is just so strong. Dun 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 da. There's a grandiose to it, and you know, just adding that little arrangement different with the vocals there, it amplifies everything quite to a significant degree. I was actually surprised at the goosebumps that I got from that, but hey, it's just a great melody. It's a great song, and Claypool does a very, very good job of messing with it. And finally we get to track 14, the final track on the album, Farewell Wonkites. And it's kind of a reprise of Hello Wonkites, but it's more jammy, it has more time, it goes on for a few minutes. And we get that dun 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 dun. But of course, Tim Alexander brings us into a full shuffle. And there's some soloing over top of it, great little bits of percussion that kind of highlight the whole Pure Imagination melody, because it's basically a jam on the Pure Imagination melody. But it's fantastic, and it's actually my favorite track on the album, if I'm totally honest. You know, like I said, it's such a strange album. It's such a weird album because, you know, remember it came out as, oh, a new Primus album. That's really interesting, and you know, it's so Willy Wonka that it's, you know, it stands out in the catalog. I mean, even though this is, as of this moment right now, the most recent full-length Primus album. A couple of weeks, the Desaturating 7 will come out. This video might be out after the Desaturating 7 comes out, but at the moment of me right now recording this, it's 2 weeks away. So it is still the most recent Primus album. But yeah, my point is, with Farewell Wonkites, is it's my favorite on the album because it feels most like, you know, Primus just being Primus and doing their jamming with the extra supplements from the Fungi ensemble. But yeah, it's a terrific jam, and you know, again, the melodies to these songs are just so strong that you know, even no matter how much, you know, Primus kind of creepifies it and turns it into something, you know, even weirder, you know, those melodies just they're so strong, and they're really good, and it works really good for a jam sequence with Farewell Wonkites. Like I said, favorite song on the album. And of course, it finishes with Claypool reprising the vocal bit from Pure Imagination, which sums it all up quite nicely. We kind of get the, you know, as his voice starts, you know, cracking and going into weirdness, we get that final on that wonderful stand-up bass. So yeah, I think that's about it. That's about it for today's incoherent ramblings about Primus. Stay tuned next time, because one way or another I'm going to be picking up the Desaturating 7, and conveniently, through that big lapse of talking about Primus albums, it's synced up pretty well. So the next video will be about the Desaturating 7, the newest album. So until then, have a great day, or night, or whatever the heck it is. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you've enjoyed these ramblings, and yeah. Stay tuned next time. You will see me in the future. Farewell.